ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a 50-day ultimatum to the Kremlin: strike peace in Ukraine or face sweeping sanctions, including secondary tariffs targeting Russian allies. Meanwhile, Putin has launched a 60-day offensive and global markets are reacting. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack the stakes behind this high-risk diplomatic gambit is Professor Scott Lucas, Professor of American Studies in University College Dublin and longtime analyst of U.S.-Russia relations. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for having me here.
So first, let's take a look at this policy shift from President Donald Trump. What do you think is driving it? Is it strategy, politics, or do you think there are some pressure being applied?
Well, I think you have to distinguish between Trump and the Trump administration. I think for Donald Trump, this is personal. He's frustrated with Vladimir Putin because Trump's vision was that he could end this Russian invasion, albeit pretty much by accepting the Kremlin's conditions, but then he could get the Nobel Peace Prize and get all the glory that he seeks each and every day. The problem with those tactics is that Vladimir Putin doesn't want to make any compromise or any concessions to give Trump that Nobel Peace Prize. So not only have Russia refused to compromise by accepting a ceasefire, they've been expanding their missile and drone attacks. These are now record-setting attacks, most of them on Ukraine civilians. And there's no easing of the demands that Russia be able to seize 20% of Ukraine, that it be able to keep Ukraine weak and demilitarized, that sanctions are lifted on Moscow, and even that the Zelensky government be pushed out of power. So with no prospect of a resolution, Trump gets angry. And then you have this decision he makes: all right, we will begin to provide weapons to Ukraine. But the Trump administration is important here because, Trump is just simply speaking off the top of his head. There are some officials in the administration, notably the envoy Keith Kellogg, who are talking with Ukraine and with its European partners about what Ukraine needs. That begins with air defenses, including those Patriot air defense systems that the U.S. will sell to NATO allies who will give to Kyiv. But it also continues with, do you give Ukraine the capacity to strike even harder inside Russia with long-range missiles? The outcome is that we don't have a clear line yet. The best estimate right now is that Ukraine will get 3 Patriot missile systems, 2 from Germany, 1 from the Netherlands in the short term. But Trump yesterday, having asked Vladimir Zelensky, can you hit Moscow, can you hit St. Petersburg? When Russia said, we don't like that, Trump went running away from that and said, no, Ukraine will not get the long-range American missiles. So while we have a shift in the American support towards Ukraine, it's not consistent, and it's not clear yet how far that will go.
All right, so a lot to unpack here. And like you mentioned, whenever Trump and Putin has a phone call talking about peace, they just increase the attack on Ukraine and increase the intensity. It doesn't seem like Trump is getting the respect from Putin that he was hoping for. Do you think that Moscow will be likely to take this new ultimatum seriously, seeing that there has already been a track record of them not really taking the U.S. administration as seriously?
Yeah, what was interesting was that on Monday night, immediately after the Trump announcement that the Patriots and other weapons would be going to Ukraine, the Kremlin's allies tried to brush this off. There were senior legislators who said, no, nothing to see here. Trump is just a bit frustrated right now. By Tuesday morning, the line had shifted, and Dmitry Peskov, the Kremlin spokesman, was saying, yes, this is serious. We are considering this. And Vladimir Putin might make a statement. That said, just because the Kremlin's taking it seriously doesn't mean that I think that it changes his tactics. There have been further waves of Russian missile and drone strikes this morning. There were 17 explosions in Ukraine's second city, Kharkiv, in only 20 minutes. So I think the dilemma for the Kremlin is this. They would like to keep Trump on side. They'd like to put him in their pocket to support their demands. But Vladimir Putin will not give up the attempt to try to break Ukraine's civilian will. The reason for that, by the way, is that Russia is not advancing as far in eastern Ukraine as some pundits say they are. They're not winning this war on the front line. Therefore, Putin keeps thinking, I'll just go harder and harder, and Ukraine civilians will give up. Newsflash, they won't. So the Kremlin will be caught between this desire to bring Trump on board and maintaining these widespread attacks for the foreseeable future.
Right. Another thing that I'm seeing that the Kremlin having trouble juggling is also the messaging. Like you said in the beginning, they're trying to brush it off as if it's nothing, not a big deal. And even when we are looking at some of the Kremlin propaganda outlets for internal messaging, it's also saying that, well, these sanctions or these threats not only doesn't hurt Russia, it's actually going to strengthen it somehow. But the day after, like I mentioned, there does seem to be a little bit of a panic there, even though perhaps not communicated within. Where do you think the disconnect is coming from, and how do you think they will be handling that going forward?
Well, I mean, part of the disconnect is just simply that we're still trying to unpack what Trump exactly said. For example, Trump had said there would be 17 Patriots that would be given to Ukraine, but nobody knew if he was referring to full-scale Patriot batteries, which have multiple launchers. Ukraine only has 6 of those right now, whether he was referring to 17 launchers or 17 missiles. So, everybody was trying to sort that out. But part of it is that, again, the Kremlin is, it's like a shark moving forward. It has to keep moving forward or else it perishes, but it doesn't necessarily know what it's moving forward to. They have really misplayed this badly since February. They had Trump in direct talks. They had Europe and Ukraine pushed off to the side. They thought they could get Trump simply to follow along with their annexation of Ukrainian territory, taking out the Zelensky government, and that didn't work. And they really haven't recovered from that. They really haven't figured out where their line is going forward. Now, I do think they will try to win Trump back. I do think you'll get another Putin phone call soon, or you'll get some nice words said about Trump. But have they gone too far? Have they really gone too far with these attacks, which have so clearly been aimed at Ukrainian civilians that even Trump knows it's bad politics to look like he's Vladimir Putin's best friend?
All right, like I mentioned, I really like that analogy of the shark having to move forward, but not really having a specific goal. We see Putin launch another 60-day offensive. And do you think that this is like part of Putin's move to increase the attacks, not really knowing where to go, but he just have to kind of carry out with it? And at this point, what else can he do that he's not already done? Attack more civilians?
I think it was just a bit of bluster from Russia that says, look, give us 60 days and we can take all of eastern Ukraine. But it is bluster that worked. If there was a silver lining for the Kremlin on what happened on Monday, it's that Donald Trump said, oh, I'm going to put tariffs on you, these 100% tariffs on Russia and countries that help it. But then he gave them this 50-day window before he would do anything. And of course, that Putin statement you're referring to, that 60 days and they'll take eastern Ukraine, had come 11 days before Trump's announcement. So you put the numbers together, and it's like, well, if Russia seriously believes this, they've got this window where they can complete the conquest of eastern Ukraine. The problem here is that I don't think Russia, and I think most analysts agree, I don't think Russia is going to be able to roll up Donetsk as well as Luhansk in the next 50 days. I don't think they can complete taking all of the Donbass. So what do they do then? But again, that doesn't mean they stop trying, which actually means that beyond all the headlines about Trump, the vital issue here is that for those who are the adults in the room, and it starts with the Europeans, but it includes the international community, they've got to maintain the support of Ukraine while we wait and see if the American aid will come. The last thing you want to do at this point, having gone this far, almost 41 months in the full-scale invasion, is to say, all right, well, we'll just wait on the Americans. You can't count on the U.S., and that includes over this next critical 50 days. I'll add one more thing. The silver lining for the Kremlin, which also came on Monday, is because of Trump's announcement that he'll consider tariffs on them, that means that the U.S. sanctions bill in the Congress, which would have been far more serious, up to 500% in penalties on Russia and its partners, if they continue the invasion, that's been suspended. It's been held up because Congress says, we'll wait and see what Trump does.
Right. Trump also mentioned secondary tariffs, though. Do you think that this is going to be substantial, especially when it comes to limiting Russia's allies, seeing that they now have also a stake in this?
If you're talking about Trump, no, it won't be substantial because Trump is economically illiterate. I'm sorry to say that, but I've watched the guy for years. The key here now is that Trump administration. It's those officials I talk about who could be vital. Can they actually join up the planning here where they could roll out those secondary tariffs in the 50 days? Because it's not, putting tariffs on countries and companies is not an easy process. You've got to do a lot of legal planning. You've got to do a lot of economic planning. You've got to do a lot of logistical planning. And so I'm going to be looking for signs as to whether the State Department, the Treasury, the Department of Defense are working together with what would be a rollout of these secondary tariffs and whether they indeed will target large countries such as China and India.
Right, so there's still a lot of complication, a lot of uncertainties here. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight, and thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thanks to you and your great viewers.
Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.